What would you do if you were denied your seat on a flight just because of your skin color? And what if the person responsible was a flight attendant from the airline? The worst part comes when you find out who is behind it all. Amina Adamako was nervous. It was her first time flying in business class, which not only meant comfort, but also marked a personal achievement. She had worked hard to get there, and although her father, Kofi Adamako, one of the country's most successful businessmen, had always been her unwavering support, she wanted to prove that she could succeed on her own. Her dream of becoming a recognized lawyer was about to take a big step forward, an interview at one of the city's top law firms. She was at the airport, walking through the halls filled with executives, men in expensive suits, and high-end women, all in a hurry. Amina looked around, noticing how, although she felt part of that professional world, racism was something that didn't disappear, sometimes with furtive glances, other times with subtle or dismissive comments. She knew that this feeling of being an outsider in this environment would never leave her, but she had learned to ignore it. As she approached the gate, she felt her anxiety about the interview rising. She was alone on this trip, without her father's reassuring presence, who was always there to give her encouraging words. This flight was a reminder that although her career had progressed, it was still full of challenges and invisible barriers that she would have to overcome on her own. Amina had already passed through the rigorous security checks without any issues. She had her boarding pass in hand and walked confidently toward the plane. The airline staff greeted her politely as she entered the boarding tunnel, but something in the flight attendant's gaze made Amina feel uncomfortable. The flight attendant, who was near the boarding door, looked Amina up and down with an expression that Amina couldn't fully decipher. Is it my appearance or the clothes I'm wearing that's causing this reaction? She thought. When she arrived at her assigned seat, Amina noticed someone was already sitting there. It was a fair-skinned passenger in a high-end business suit, reading a newspaper. Amina approached and showed her ticket with her seat number. "Excuse me, this is my seat. It's reserved for me," Amina said, pointing to her ticket. The woman glanced at her briefly before huffing and getting up with a flourish, without a word. Amina sat down, still surprised, but grateful that the situation hadn't been more complicated. She settled into her business class seat, thinking about how life, although full of obstacles, had allowed her to get this far. But the flight hadn't even started yet, and the discomfort she felt wouldn't end so quickly. Soon after, the fair-skinned flight attendant approached Amina with a cold, almost distant expression. With a forced smile and without making eye contact, she said, "Sorry, I think there's been a mistake with your reservation. That seat doesn't belong to you." Amina frowned, confused. "What do you mean it doesn't belong to me? This is my seat according to my ticket. Can I see the system to have it checked?" The flight attendant, who already seemed a bit irritated, responded quickly, "It's not necessary. This seat is reserved for another higher-profile passenger. You can go to economy class, where there is availability." Amina's heart stopped for a second. What? Were they telling her she couldn't stay in her seat? Frustration started to bubble inside her as the warmth of subtle racism began to envelop her. "What kind of criteria do you use to determine who gets a seat?" Amina asked, keeping calm, but her voice started to tremble. The flight attendant didn't look at her, staring straight ahead as if it were just another routine. "The business class seat is reserved for those with priority. Please go to economy class." "But I paid for this seat," Amina replied, her voice now firmer, trying to control her indignation. "What kind of discrimination is this? Why are you kicking me out of my seat?" The flight attendant, with a smile that tried to be professional, quickly responded, "Sorry, but this is what we have to do. I can't do anything for you." Amina, feeling anger take over, stopped insisting. Her heart was pounding as she headed, with her head down, to the back of the plane where the economy class was. Passengers who watched her remained silent. Some couldn't hide their discomfort, but no one dared intervene. Amina knew that these kinds of situations were never easy, and that often the system that protected them could be as powerful as the people who enforced it. She sat in a regular seat, trying to calm down. Her mind was racing. Why did this happen to me? What am I supposed to do? She wondered. The flight was going to be long, and although she tried to focus on what she had to do in her upcoming meeting, Emotions continued to torment her. But something inside her refused to accept that it was just a mistake. Something told her that what had happened was not just a mix-up, but a calculated reaction. The flight took off. The sound of the plane lifting off lulled her, but it didn't calm her completely. At that moment, something changed in the cabin when the business class door opened abruptly and a familiar figure walked in, striding with purpose. It was her father, Kofi Adamako. Amina recognized him instantly. Kofi was a man with an imposing presence, tall, with a determined gaze that inspired respect and admiration. He had always been her mentor, not only as a father, but also as an example of strength and determination in the business world. His presence was not only impressive, but had an air of authority that few could ignore. When Kofi saw Amina sitting in economy class, something changed in his face. His daughter, his dear daughter, didn't deserve to be there. Without thinking twice, he walked confidently toward the flight attendant. She didn't recognize him immediately, but upon seeing his determined attitude, her eyes widened in surprise. "What's going on here?" Kofi asked in a low voice, but with enough authority for everyone around to pay attention. The flight attendant hesitated for a moment, clearly uncomfortable. "Sir, the young lady was in a business class seat, but it seems there's an error with her reservation," the flight attendant stammered, looking at Kofi without daring to say more. Kofi, without wasting a second, turned to Amina and said softly, "Let's clear this up." Amina, already tired of the situation, began to stand up, but before she could say anything else, Kofi stepped forward. "Do you know who I am?" he asked, looking the flight attendant directly in the eyes. "I'm Kofi Adamako, CEO of Adamako Enterprises, one of the largest sponsors of this airline. My daughter has that seat assigned, and she wants it back." The flight attendant immediately paled, realizing who was standing in front of her. "I'm so sorry, sir. I didn't know. I had no idea who she was." "Well, now you do," Kofi said firmly. "And what just happened will not be tolerated. This is a clear example of discrimination, and I won't allow it to happen again." Just as quickly, the flight attendant escorted Amina back to her seat in business class, while murmurs among the passengers grew louder. Some looked at Kofi with respect, others with shame for having witnessed such an injustice. Amina didn't feel relief returning to her seat. On the contrary, she felt that the damage had already been done. But at least her father had shown her the importance of not staying silent and facing adversity. The rest of the flight passed in silence. The comments among the passengers were inevitable, but Amina remained calm. She knew that her place in the world didn't depend on a seat on a plane or someone else's approval. What mattered was the determination with which she would face each challenge, no matter how difficult.